IELTS Life Skills A1 Spouse Visa Test.
Hello everyone, this is Angelina. I'm an IELTS coach and a language trainer, and I welcome you back to the series of lessons for the preparation of IELTS A1 Life Skills Speaking Test. There are 40 important topics. If you prepare those topics, your success is guaranteed. But there are some additional topics that have recently appeared in the exam. You must prepare those to secure your success. Our topic for today is countryside. It is an important topic, so we'll talk about the questions first. Do you like countryside? Have you ever visited the countryside? Have you ever lived in the countryside? What do you like about the countryside? What do you dislike about the countryside? What do people do in the countryside? What is the job of people in the countryside? Or what type of work do people do in the countryside? How do people travel in the countryside? What do people eat in the countryside? What types of houses do people have in the countryside? Do people in the countryside have good medical facilities? Do people in the countryside have good schools? Do you think there are good roads and traffic jams in the countryside? Do you think there are supermarkets in the countryside? Do you think there are banks in the countryside? Do you think there is less pollution in the countryside? How do you think countrysides are different from the cities? Let's answer these questions. Before we answer these questions, you must know what is a countryside. A countryside looks more like a village, right? There's a lot of greenery, a lot of farms, and a lot of fields. Cities are different and populated. This is how a city looks, and this is how a countryside or a village looks. Now, let's move to the answers. Do you like countryside? Yes, I love countryside. It is difficult for me to live in the countryside, but I like the fact that there is fresh air, fresh food, and people are very friendly in the countryside. People are also very simple in the countryside. Have you ever visited a countryside? So if you're living in a city, you can say, yes, I have visited a countryside, or you can say, no, I have never visited a countryside. If you are living in the countryside, then you can say that I live in a village or I live in the countryside. Have you ever lived in the countryside? If you live in a village or in the countryside, you can say, yes, I've been living in the countryside for 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years. Or you can say, I can never imagine living in the countryside because I live in the city and I like the life in the city. What do you like about the countryside? There are many things that I like about the countryside. There is less pollution in the countryside. The air is fresher. The food is fresher. The vegetables, milk, yogurt, and most importantly, water is fresh too in the countryside, as the water is not very polluted. It is drinkable. What do you dislike about countryside? There are many things that I don't like about the countryside. There are not good schools in the countryside. There are not many jobs available in the countryside. There are not good medical facilities available in the countryside. There is no good road system in the countryside. Public transport is not available in the countryside. People do not have big stores in the countryside. People don't have a lot of technology in the countryside. These are the things that I don't like about the countryside. How do people travel in the countryside? As people do not have a good transport system in the countryside, people normally travel by bicycles or motorbikes. Very few people have carriages or vans. Sometimes people also have trucks in the countryside, and this is how people travel. Moreover, some people travel by carts. There are donkey carts or carts pulled by the bulls. We call them carriages. And some carts pulled by the horses, which are also called horse carriages. What kinds of houses do people like to live in the countryside? Or what types of houses do people have in the countryside? In the countryside, people have houses which are made up of mud, wood, bricks. Normally, people have huts in the countryside. This is how a hut looks like. What do people like to wear in the countryside? In the countryside, people like to wear simple clothes. Do people have friendly relationships with their neighbors in the countryside? Yes, people are very helpful and they have great relationships with their neighbors in the countryside. What do people do in the countryside? Or what types of jobs are available in the countryside? Or what type of work do people do in the countryside? People normally do farming in the countryside. The main occupation, profession, or work of the people is farming. Farming. Are there any good schools in the countryside? No, there are not many good schools in the countryside. Normally, in the countryside or in the villages, the schools are only for the preliminary education that is called the primary education. Do you think there are good medical facilities in the countryside? No, there are not at all good medical facilities available in the countryside. People die because of disease and they have to travel to cities in big hospitals for the treatment of the diseases. Do you think there are traffic jams in the countryside? No, I don't think so. There are traffic jams in the countryside because people don't have a lot of vehicles or a lot of cars, right? And this is impossible to have a traffic jam in the countryside. The roads are absolutely empty. Most of the times, the roads are unpaved. Unpaved roads look kind of like this. What is the difference between the countryside and a city? Countryside and the city, they are two different places. Cities have a lot of facilities: transport, food, supermarkets, schools, colleges, universities, hospitals, airports, police stations, and many more. But in the countryside, people are very simple and they do not have a lot of facilities. The air is very clean, the food is very fresh. There are many fields and animals in the countryside. But they have to go to the cities for good education, for good medical treatment, and for better jobs. Would you ever prefer to live in the countryside? No, because I live in a city. I would not prefer to live in the countryside. I can travel to the countryside for 1 or 2 days as a picnic or as a holiday, but I cannot imagine to spend my life in the countryside. Well, if you learned anything from this topic, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.